Hi, this is William Naden, and today I'm going to talk about reverb and buses. Okay, so there's a couple things on the track that we have to know about, and those are effects. Okay, so if I right click on effects, I can pull up insert audio effects, and there it'll show my different plugins. Now, Cakewalk comes with a lot of great default effects that you can use. Okay, and to list some of the ones that I use the reverb, so the Sonatus reverb. I also use the compressor, so Sonatus compressor. And then as far as equalizing goes, I use a VST that I found called TDR Nova, which will help with highs, mids, and lows of equalizing the sound. Okay, so all of these different kind of things go into the effects track. I can also just press the plus button here at the top of the box, and it'll pull up the same thing as if I right clicked. So at any point, if I have something loaded up, let's pull up reverb. If at any point I have something loaded in, I can bypass it and turn it off, so it's still there, but it's acting as if it's turned off, so you're not going to hear the reverb. Or there's a drop down menu where I can just delete the effect. At any point that I have an effect, and I can put in as many effects as I want into any given track, I can always hit the bypass rack at the top, and that will turn off all the effects. So if, let's say, I put in a reverb and then I put in a compressor there, so now I have a compressor, and the order in which they're in also matters. So first it compresses and then there's the reverb, and that's actually the more ideal way as far as I can remember, because if you have the reverb first, then the reverb is also going to get compressed along with the rest of the vocals. So you actually want to have it read as if it's compressing first and then the reverb second. So the order does matter. So I'm going to actually go ahead and delete these. So as far as reverbs go, they're very intensive on the processing power of your computer. So you don't want too many reverbs in your file. And so what we do is we use what is called a bus. So I'm going to drag this over here. Okay, so here's our master, our metronome, and then a little default preview bus that it starts us out with. So I can go ahead and delete this bus, and we're going to insert stereo bus. Okay, so here we have stereo bus C. And if we scroll up in this console view down here, each fader also has an effects rack, so you can put an effect on your master track and put reverb over the entire song. I usually put a compressor on the master track, just a little bit of compression, and that helps glue it together. But otherwise, that's about the only thing I do to the master. You can put an equalizer on the master track too, but generally I find it's better if you do that with each individual track. And so on the bus track, we're going to create a reverb effect. Okay, we can go ahead and exit that, and we can open it up anytime by double clicking the effect, and there it's back. Inside each effect, there's a number of different presets that come with it, as well as all the different options for how you want your reverb to sound. Now, I'm going to show you how to route so that all your audio that goes into your microphone will be using the same reverb. And so technically there's only one reverb in your project, and therefore it lowers the amount of power needed to run the reverb, because you don't want your computer to crash. You don't want it to run slowly while you're working. Okay, so here I have my audio track. I'm going to make it's the right input. Okay. And here I'm going to go down to the console view. Now in the console view, there's a section below effects, which is called sends. So I can just press the plus icon here, and I can mouse down to bus C. Now I can always rename the bus. So I can rename this bus to reverb. Okay, there we go. And so maybe we can say reverb 1. Okay. And so now, as you can see, the sends is going down to this bus track, the reverb 1. So now every track, you know, every time I record, you're going to hear that reverb, and I can change the kind of reverb again by opening it up again, and I can go back up to my track. There's a drop-down menu next to the add track and duplicate track feature where you can select what view you want for the track. So sometimes you can take that drop-down menu and select what you want to see on your track. So now you can see the effects rack, or you can see the in and out. The out is always going to be routed to the master. I wouldn't touch that. All what's really important is the in. You can look at the mix, but these volume pans and gains can all be controlled down here, the bottom mixer. There's actually a gain function here. It's always starts out at 0. It's just up above, and you can actually, excuse me, it's right here. That's the level for the reverb. So if I take away the send, I can turn off the send so that it's not sending anymore. I can enable it, turn it back on. I can just delete the send without deleting the reverb or the bus. I can add it to as many sends as I like, so I can add it as many buses as I like. Okay, so it all depends on what you want to do with it. There is a gain function at the top of each bar. If you scroll up at the top of each fader, and there's a gain function. So kind of like how there's a microphone has the gain function where you can turn it up so you can record and pick up all those sounds you need. Every single track also has that function. Okay, so just a useful thing to know. So we can kind of scroll back down here, and we are having a send out. Okay, so now that we've got that set up, why don't we, so we have our track selected, it's highlighted, right? The audio track. And so if we want, let's say we record something, right? So I'm just gonna arm and record. Hello. And we can listen back, and as you'll see down here, you're gonna hear the reverb as well. Hello. It's ever so slight. Okay, so let's say we record that, but then we want to overdub it, right? We want to add extra tracks. Well, we could press the add track button, but what if we just want all the same settings, right? What if we want all the same kind of settings and we don't need to go through all that hassle? Well, we just make sure it's highlighted, then we press duplicate track, and there we have the same thing. So it's just going to give us some default tracks, but as you can see, once you duplicate, it'll remember all the settings and effects. Okay, so if you have an effect in here, let's say you have a compressor that you really like, okay, because vocals are good to have compressors with. Okay, so you have a compressor on the track, and then it's have as a send out to the reverb, to the bus track. Okay, and then you duplicate that, and now this new duplicated track will have the compressor. Okay, so depending on which one you have selected, see, these don't have compressors, but depending on which one you have selected, highlighted, you're going to duplicate that track, and it's going to carry over all the effects as well as the sends. Okay, so it's just very useful. You can work very quickly on getting what you want. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and delete these. All right, So let's say for track 2, right? For track 2, we want a different reverb. Okay, so we're not going to put the reverb on the track. We're actually going to make a new bus. Okay, so in the new bus, we're going to also add in a reverb. And it's okay to have multiple reverbs. It's just, you know, maybe you're creating like 10 or 20 different vocal tracks, okay? And you don't want reverb on every single one of them. But you have like maybe 3 or 4 reverbs on different buses. And so that's a lot lighter on your computer to be able to process all that, right? So that's, again, that's the whole point to this. And so here we can change the kind of reverb. So I'm just going to give it a different sound. So I'm just going to quick pick a preset. Okay, so now this reverb, we'll call this reverb 2. If you look over here on the track, the send is going out to reverb 1. So you can just drop down the menu. You don't have to delete the send. You can just change where it's routed to. So I can just click reverb 2 and there we go. And now the first track is routed to reverb 1. The second track is routed to reverb 2. I can arm that for recording. Hello. Hello. Okay. Also important to note. Important to know. Okay, so we go to the ins and outs, right? As you can see, we actually have 2 bars here. And how did we get the 2 bars? Well, we actually didn't have the right input selected. So if you scroll down here, and as you can see, it went to stereo. So we're actually only recording 1 ear at a time. So we want to make sure that the right input, okay? So we can go ahead and delete that, and we can try again. Hello. Hello. Okay. Now, as we listen back, notice that it's pulling from the 2 different reverbs. Hello. Hello. And they sound different, okay? And it's good to trim your clips so that you don't hear the space bar or clicking after a take, okay? So now that we've kind of figured out how the vocals work, we can look at something like guitars. So I'm going to create a new audio track. I'm going to select third input. Okay, it's our line in. Okay. Change this view to effects. So in the effects box, I can insert. And for guitars, Cakewalk, or at least Cakewalk comes with a demo of TH3. I went ahead and bought the whole TH3 suite because I enjoy it very much, but eventually I moved on to a different one that I really, really love. Sometimes if Cakewalk finds the VST, it doesn't quite know what it is, it'll just send it to this uncategorized panel. That's fine, that's okay. So here we have Archetype Petrucci. Just going to let this load in. Okay, so here's the thing. You might think to yourself like, well, if you're going to have an instrument, right, like a guitar, then why not just create an instrument tab and create that instead of an audio track? Well, the difference is that this is using, you got to remember the inputs, right? So the input is a line in input, okay? So it's going to work with effects, and it's going to work with whatever effects are in the box. And so MIDI and the instrument works a little differently, okay? And that'll work more with USB connection as well as MIDI connection, okay? So I'm going to go over that in a different video. So for something like guitar and bass guitar and a microphone, you're generally going to use the effects box, okay? Not needless to say, MIDI channels still have an effects box, and you can put reverb and compression as well on a MIDI track as well. But you're going to want to create an audio track for these, for the XLR and line inputs, okay? So here we have our virtual guitar amp. I'm going to turn on the input echo so I can hear it. Here I have my guitar. Okay, and we can change the default. It just starts on the default, so I'm just going to pick a quick factory setting. Maybe I'll go in here into artists, and I'll just mouse down here, just pick something that sounds good really quick. All right, so here I have my guitar, and it works just fine. Now remember it's a VST. Ultimately, like, this effect is considered a VST. Okay, so that's how Cakewalk's gonna find it. And you don't really need too much. Like, you don't need to add a reverb in the effects, because you can add the reverb here in the virtual guitar amp VST. Okay, so then again, I can exit this, I can open it back up anytime. It'll always remember my settings inside of it, and I can arm the recording. I can exit this. Let's go here on the track. I'll hit R for record. Very nice. And let's zoom out a little bit. We can listen back. We can find the beginning of the clip right here on this beat. We'll just trim it here. And now we have a little file. It lasts 4 measures. We can just trim the end of that. And there we have a little chunk that we can work with. And if I want, let's say I want another guitar and I want more or less the same settings, right? Then I can go ahead and I can duplicate this track as well. And here I can disarm that first track, and it'll have all the same settings. And I can record alongside. Alright, that was a little sloppy, but as you can see, we can always pan them to the left and the right. Let's skip into it a little bit. And we can create and start adding and working very quickly on making layers and recording using all of these features: the duplicate, the buses, the effects, and all the different tools at our disposal: compression, reverb, EQ, and that'll really help you get going on recording. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully I covered enough, and we'll see you in the next one.